Rocket ship, go now. You have found the leadership lunchtime live stream. I'm going to maximize this so I can see myself, and this isn't quite so awkward. Hello, good day, good lunchtime to you all. Hello. Okay, let's just take a second to get our bearings here. Hopefully, some people pop on. We get some eyeballs. I'll give that just but a wee minute. Okay, so today's question, what kinds of emergent leaders are there? Okay, so you may have heard of this term emergent leadership or describing someone as an emergent leader. What does that mean? Okay, so when I was going back to the literature, starting from the late 2000s onwards, let's say 2010-ish, there was some of the organizational literature that seemed to be talking about this notion of emergent leaders. Okay, so what were they talking about? What they seem to be dealing with is that, okay, so now that there's better tools, and this math-wise this would come out of network and graph theory, but basically it's like social network analysis. They were starting to use that lens to, obviously, because we started having social networks on a larger, massive scale, and this became an ever more popular lens to be able to look at organizations and all kinds of things, influence, right? So from that, there becomes this lens of what is an emergent leader, and you could also think of like as part of organizations, business organizations, as their context changes and it becomes more VUCA and they need to adapt more, the role of like how does a manager, how does an executive leader add value is going to differ, right? So this might make more sense when we say, okay, well, what types of emergent leaders are there? Okay, so there's this key concept in network theory, which is centrality. Okay, it's how interconnected one node is to another, one person is to another. Except for what this actually means is there's a few different flavors of what that looks like. Okay, so one is around max number of connections, direct connections, first degree connections, right? Second is about the shortest connections, which has to do with like how fast or how you could say tightly connected, but it actually has to do in some sense also with how fast things propagate throughout that network. So who has the shortest connections, and the last one would be, and this is something that only makes sense when you think about larger groups and contexts. It's not quite who has the most direct reach, because that would be the first one, who has the most number of connections. It's who is most important to reaching other networks. And so the reason why that last one is important is because when we look at social networks, they are very heterogeneous. There are clusters, some have more influence than others, but there are these clusters of various kind of hierarchies and meso layers of networks and influencers and things, right? And so this last one is a measurement of how much does this person help you extend into new clusters of networks, right? Okay, so here's my interpretation of this, right? From a business management standpoint, we would say the first one, number of connections, is around how much direct influence do you have, and these could be friends, these could be professional contacts, whatever it is. In a management context, we would be talking about kind of peers and subordinates, right? But how much people do you have direct influence over? You can even just broaden that and just say it's like, could you directly solicit help from, or you have some authority or status over, right? But there's other ways to interpret that. So please, I would love your feedback on this. The second one, that short cycle time. So here's how I think that would emerge. Have you ever have you ever been on a team with a great engineer, a great analyst, who we know is kind of a bit introverted and shrewd, and yet if you come to them with the right particular kind of problem, they either like immediately have a solution for you, or they know how to like activate and like pull intel to like very swiftly get you a solution. And sometimes in crisis mode, this feels like, oh yeah, there's this go-to person. You're go talk to Johnny if whatever is the situation, and he'll quickly have a solution, right? That's what to me the second one feels like. There are these known experts that can solve known problems. And there's also one way to think of that as on more of a team level is that those short connections have this kind of pre-existing tribe, pre-existing social warmth. And so you guys are already up and ready to go, right? There's like this, latent warm team, latent warm relationship that's already ready to go there, right? Which is fantastic. And honestly, you want that in an active team anyway. It's not like you just want to have these kind of latent expert people waiting to be activated. You want to make that a normal part of operations. And then the last one is the most interesting, and I think it relates most to how, and you could think of these as like project sponsors or project champions, or really just executive stakeholders. Often these would be board members or C-level people, how they need to operate. Because, and I heard this description once of like, what is the gift that well-connected people, they were even kind of framing it as like, yeah, there was a correlation between amount of connectivity and kind of wealth. And so, they, in some sense, I don't want to say that they were defending the rich, but they were trying to see, it's like, is there any utility in this? And that's what it seemed to be, is that they could, it's this third area where they could bridge between networks. And so because they have a very large network reach, they not just from from the team you're dealing with out, they can kind of promote out whatever the good word, whatever the information is you want. But also the opposite, because they have this larger outer network reach, more so than the current smaller clusters that we're talking about. They can pull in resources, right? Whether that's the people, the money, the influence, the sign off on the right decision maker to get something moving forward, right? And that is actually critical. And anyone that's done ever more large, complex projects knows that is critical, right? Success is not just this inside out thing of how much effort can I individually put in or my team put in. It's this kind of context effort of like, do I have the right resources at the right time? Am I getting buy-in from the right people? I guess this is also a great reminder that like a project can be, on time, on budget, firmly deliver the right product, but if it's not ultimately adding value, even if it was, what was scoped a few years ago or what people thought they wanted, if it's not ultimately delivering value to someone, it's useless, right? And so I think this last one is really critical for, are we doing something high level which is impactful and useful to people that can bring in clout, right? Okay, so let me ask you guys this question. I know we got a lot of eyeballs right now. Which type of leader, so let's say the highly connected leader, the kind of swift solutions leader, or the kind of the stakeholder solutions leader, which do you think you would want for a salesman? And I'll give you a little bit of breadth there. Whatever flavor, could be lead gen, could be account management. But what do you think you might want for a sales type role? And what do you think you might want for a product owner? And what do you think you might want for, let's say, a tech startup founder? What do you think? What do you think? I'll put it here in the comments. I love your feedback. I would love it. I want the feedback. I thrive on the feedback. Some would say I need the feedback. I need you to give it to me, please. Crunch ideas. Which leader would you recommend for sales role? I'm trying to think of what we said. Product owner role and a tech founder role. Dun, 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 dun. We getting any feedback here? I love your input on this stuff. I actually think this is kind of the future of where management is going, particularly team management and team dynamics. And so I'm not blowing anyone's mind saying manager's job is to enable people. That's always been the case. Some of the most evidence-based stuff we know is that we know transformational leadership, which is basically that you're building up and transforming your team. You're building up capacity for your own, the long-term interest of the team being more capable, people being more capable. So that's not mind-blowing. I think what makes this different is to say partly acumen, but in some sense, social networks are accrued. There's a certain prudential quality of you've built up a network. So in that way, I would say it's more like an asset. It's more like a social asset, an influence asset, than just a personal acumen. The personal acumen, the individual characteristics might be needed, but the derivative, the downstream result of that is that you've built up this much clout and influence and expertise and respect, or all the different ways you could conceive this, right? So this is totally going to be changing how we're thinking about what a good manager is and isn't, and you can even say area to area, what a good kind of business development manager is, what a good engineering manager is, what a good this and that. Anyway, I'd love your input on those roles. So of the different kinds, the high connectivity, the fast connectivity, or like the fast response, and the stakeholder solution. What do you think? What do you think? Maybe this is too brief of a video to get too long into this. there is one of the other thing I want to say about emergent leadership. When we look at the literature, one thing we naturally find is, and so as much as you could say something like you want a good manager, you want a project manager to be as influential as possible, what we actually see is that there are natural, and that there are natural people that seem to communicate more. And in one paper I saw, that's what they were defining as the emergent leaders, right? And you could see how there would be kind of a bit of a correlation between emergent leader and charismatic leader, because the way that it was framing it is like, listen, if you look at the volume of communication flow, the emergent leaders communicated about twice as much, right? And so it makes sense that regardless of who has status or rank, if Sarah is twice as communicative and seems to have twice the amount of connectivity and is basically way more aware and interconnected with what's actually going on. She's going to have a lot more, regardless of what her role is or isn't, she's going to have a lot more influence than you think. Which therefore means the second part of maybe you should put her in a situation where she can leverage and capture value of that, and that's a win-win. The organization can capture value of that, right? I think even ENFJs at their best are like that. They're great at kind of getting big crowds and kind of mass market reach, but they're not the best deep thinkers, right? So you want to put them in this community outreach kind of role. Why? Because they're naturally built for that, and they've built up all that kind of social acumen, right? I think this is really going to be shifting to how we're thinking about sales. So if you guys have ever seen Mad Men, so one of the things they say about Pete Campbell in the first or second episode is like, well, why is Pete Campbell here? It's like, well, beyond saying he's actually a decent salesman who's like building his skills up, like also, oh yeah, he comes with Dow Chemical, like he comes with an existing asset, right? I would say on the mid and kind of more senior levels of sales, of business development, yeah. It's like you're coming with a big pre-built network, right? You're coming with big ins to certain industries, and that helps you sell, right? So that's one way to think of this. But this actually starts to go into kind of social network as asset and what that's going to mean for the influence you need. Anyway, so I think we're going a little bit too deep in the rabbit hole. So just to recap, what types of emergent leaders are there? Okay, so when I look at graph theory, here's what I'm seeing. You're seeing these highly connected leaders that can exert a lot of direct influence. You're seeing these swift solution leaders who, yeah, they have their tribe, they have their expertise. You come with them with the crisis, and they're going to stabilize things. And you have these widespread stakeholders, which can pull in resources, which can transform things, or other direction out. They can promote things in lots of new places. Rahul, fantastic. Someone finally commented live on my video while I'm actually doing it, because these are brief videos. They're meant to be like 15 minutes. Rahul, I'd say someone who takes their team's desire into consideration and tries to focus their energy into a mutual task. The other thing is a paragon, exactly. They're trying to lead by example. People tend to naturally gravitate towards high energy or high achieving individuals who present an aura of assurance. Yeah, so that's a good way to think of these. All of these, in some sense, build trust and influence, and that okay. So probably the high connectivity one, they're just very active, and whether they're actually listening well or not, they're at least engaging large amounts of people. So there's at least a social activity, and that we know that one of the major facets of extroversion. You could think of it as enthusiasm. You could think of it as like sociability. Yeah, like that makes perfect sense. The point Rahul is making about the Paragon and other things, and yeah, like I mentioned, the crack engineer, the crack analyst. Why do you respect them? Because they are sharp and well trained and have deep expertise. So when they say something, there's a lot of discernment and knowing the right successful ways and to approach things or not approach things behind all of this, right? And yeah, and that feels more like an earthy expertise and respect, right? They've kind of earned that. And then the last point, he was also just saying that it's like people who can exude a sense of confidence and assurance in general will tend to be more charismatic, right? And I would say that's one of the you want that to be coupled with your actual skill, but I would say if you get too much in that thing too early, that's a really bad sign. And I see this in startup leaders, 22, 25, who are already told they're these amazing world leaders, even though they've accomplished nothing. And I've seen this in 19, 20-year-old, not even done their degree yet, business students, or some of them are even like leadership philosophy kind of students, and what they become really more used to is kind of playing politics, to pitching and talking oration in a certain way, getting people energized. But because there's not a lot of but the confidence because it's EQ wise haven't done their development. They're not well rounded. Technical expertise wise are not there, but also just overall work and people and project experience, variety of experience is not there. It really falls flat, right? I guess this is a good point to remind people that. So if you think of dark personality traits, part of and I think it's a cocktail of both psychopathy and narcissism, can allow someone to that much more give this false front of confidence, or you could, particularly with things like psychopathy, you could flip that and it's like they're so out of touch with reality and their own kind of lost in their own head, unempathetic way that nothing phases them. It's like yes, because they're not really in touch with reality, and so I would say, Bobby the EQ coach would say, learn to feel, and you could say this about a leader, but you could also just say this around people in general. Learn to feel out how someone is relating with you, their amount of empathy and appropriateness in terms of your boundaries and that relational dance, and also ask them questions that are getting them to poke how flexible and long term their thinking can be. And I say that knowing that there are people. There are very, creative in the most aloof sense people, which are not good or interested in applying their skills. So for all their mental nimbleness, it doesn't go anywhere, and they can often balk at criticality and long-term planning. And then you have the opposite. You have people that love and need linear planning, and I would say people obsessed with productivity, and in that way it brings them towards false kind of protective KPIs, which are bad at deep thinking, bad at adjustment, and it actually really makes them bad at strategy. So if you remember from my last live stream, we were talking about what two emotions do you need to be able to adapt and build a good future for your business, right? It's anticipation or excitement, because that has to do with play, and really both of them are curiosity, but that has to do with play and finding and creating new options, and the other has to do with surprise, which is more about pulling back and orienting and getting some new, better working models, mental models of what the hell is going on here, right? Oh, do we have another? Okay, that's good. So we kind of talked about what the first two might look like in terms of a high energy person who's putting effort into lots of connections and communication, and a kind of deep expertise person who really has a sense of gravitas and station and kind of earned respect in a certain domain because they have so much practice. How would you typify the last one? I would say someone that knows right place, right time in terms of how to pull in resources or tap the right person. And okay, so if you think of, I don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole. I've already hit on two other topics I don't want to, but if you think of King, Warrior, Mage, Lover model, okay, what are the cognitive functions of King, Queen energy? It's introverted sensation, which is a sense of kind of memory and history, lived identity. But then the two extroverted functions are extroverted thinking, which is about efficient systems and productivity, and extroverted feeling, which is around harmony and relationships and alliances, right? And so I think that kind of stakeholder solution end of things relates very much to King Queen energy. It's it's the right people solution, it's the right ally, it's the right resource, it's the right added, let's weave this system into that system at just the right point to enable growth, to enable prosperity and progress and bigger scale impact, right? And so then the wisdom part of that is, when do you apply that? Or you could think of it as, when is it validated enough that it is better for the system? The kings and queens are often very concerned with risk management and stability. It's in some sense it's almost like protecting the moment or making sure the way of operating is well organized. And so they want to just see that you've whatever this new thing that's up and going and growing is worth doing. But if they see that, great, they want to put resources behind it, right? Yeah, they want it to grow and they want the whole system to get better. Okay. I've been going on for 18 and a half minutes now. I think that's enough. I love your comments, insights, critical feedback, or, just general debate on this. Good debate. Hey, Bobby, I have some other ideas. Hey, Bobby, I disagree with this point. Hey, Bobby, have you read this research article? Bad points. Hey, Bobby, your video sucks because your basement is disorganized. Well, that's true. That's true. Okay, well, I'll note that one. You don't have to say it. I already got it. Or people before in the past have said, Bobby, I'm very interested in the donuts and coffee that you sometimes eat and drink during your videos. Well, good. Maybe next time I'll have a coffee and donut, but not if I'm trying to keep this brief. But if you're here because you want to watch me eating a coffee and donut, I don't know if you're my target market. I just don't know. Okay, Emergent leaders, 3 flavors. I hope you learned something. High degree of connection, swift solutions, stakeholder solutions. It's going to change the way we think about teams and management. All right, I love you guys. I will see you next week, I think next Monday. Sayonara.